Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 425. Today we're going to talk about Steamworks. This is from Tasty Minstrel Games. This will be hitting stores about now. It came out about Gen Con time, and I think it's releasing about now from a Kickstarter that was run previously. This is a 2 to 5 player game, and it's sort of a worker placement, tile placement kind of game. So what you're doing is each player will have these different devices in front of them, and they'll build tiles next to each other in little clumps and groups. And so when you activate the different devices, they'll do different combinations of things depending on which one you activate. Well, you're taking your mechanics or your workers and placing them on the tiles and then activating them. And you can place them on other players' devices, on your own. Each player will have their own player board that can be unique and individualized to have different, special abilities and stuff. But they can place them on, and then you're basically turning them into like this giant engine building thing. Not only is it sort of an engine building game from the mechanical sense, but also from the thematic sense. You've got these sort of steampunk engines that are churning through and burning up and creating points basically for you at the end of the day. So let's take a look at the game, and then I will tell you what I think of it. So in Steamworks, each player is going to take on a different unique character, and the object of the game is to build these different inventions and devices for the queen and sort of try to get your prestige and fame that way. You can see the box says 90 to 120 minutes. That's about right, especially as you add more players to the game. Here we can see all the components that you get in the game. Each player is going to get their own player board with their character on there. And you've got this sort of main board, which is going to have these different tiers of tiles scrolling out on this conveyor belt that you're going to be basically drafting and adding to your display in various different devices that you're going to construct. And here we've got one of the characters. This is Lady Alice Brannigan. And you can see she's got some worker placement spaces on the right, as well as some setup information. You can see this is the B side of the character sheet. The game recommends that you play with the A or B side, depending on how experienced you are, and I would say that seems to hold pretty much true. You want to stick with the A side until you learn the game. Now here we can see the 3 worker placement spots that are on Alice Brannigan's board. These do a variety of things, I'll tell you about them. Everything is driven by icons, as you can see here. It's really not too difficult. There is a nice index in the back, but you will be definitely referring to that and looking at what the icons do and things like that for your first game or two possibly. And in the center of your board, you're going to have some startup information like the amount of money you start with and the different components that you're going to start with in your inventory. So here you can see the different tiles that you'll start with, and again, more icons, which I'll get into in just a second. And then each player is going to start with 2 workers in their color. You're going to put them on the 0 and the 1 spot. And these are the workers you're going to start with in the game, and this is the amount of money it's going to be able to place the worker. Your other workers will be on the conveyor belt board. You'll acquire these round by round, and then in the case of the automaton, you'll actually get that by activating certain tiles every round. So your turn is super simple. You're going to take one of your workers. You're going to either place them on one of your little special spots on your board or out into any other player's source. So you're always going to build up a source, and that source is going to attach to it several components. When you activate that source, all the adjacent components and different actions and things are going to trigger, and you'll be able to do those, whether that's in front of you or somebody else's player. Now, the other thing you can do on your turn is instead of actually taking a worker and placing it, let's say you couldn't pay for it, you didn't have any money to place your $1 worker, you take it off and put it onto your character sheet, and then you would get that much money. So you would sort of pass and then get $1. And then as you get more workers, of course, they get more expensive. But that's all you're doing on your turn, is you place a worker or you pass with a worker and get a little bit of money. After everybody goes around, moving left to right, you've got to play the workers in that order. Then you go on to the next round. So let's just take a look at the 4 basic actions that each player is going to get if they use the sort of beginner side of their board. Now this first one allows you to grab a component off of the conveyor belt. So if we look here, we've only got the 1 level of components available to start the game. But as you progress through further rounds, you're going to activate the different layers and add more pieces to the board to be able to pull from. Now this first action here allows us to pull the rightmost component from any of the currently active levels. This next action is to grab one of the sources, and the sources are very important. So here we can see at the top of the conveyor belt board the 3 sort of basic sources, the basic sources of energy in the game: clockwork, steam, and electrical. And when you take this action, you can take one of these types. And when you take a tile, you're going to go ahead and put it underneath your player board, and this is what's in your current supply, your inventory. Now the next action here allows you to build a device of size 2. You can see it indicates a source, and anytime you see this sort of little wheel, this cross, that indicates any source, and then the sort of blank tile is any other component. It's always going to be the exact size. You might get other actions that allow you to build a size 3 or a size 4. You've always got to build something of the specified size exactly, and that's very important and key to the game. Now let's say we took that action and we went ahead and built the steam source with its accompanying upgrader. Now you can see these can match because the upgrader is actually able to connect to any type of energy source. You can see here is the connection for steam, but you could also make the connection over here on the right to a clockwork source, or as you can see here, to an electrical source. And the source in the case of this upgrader is very important what type of source it actually is. Now, if you look here at the tile, you can see the 3 different sources depicted here from top to bottom: clockwork, steam, and electric. And depending on which source you are connecting to it and activating is the action that you can actually do. So in this case, if we connected a clockwork source, you can see we can upgrade a size 2 device up to a size 3. If we connected and activated a steam, we could go from a 3 to a 4, and then so on with the electrical to get a size 4 device to a size 5. And this is a very key point of the game. You saw earlier where I said you had to build an exactly a size 2 device, or in this case you had to actually upgrade a specific size to the next step up. That's very sort of off-putting a little bit, I think, for your first game. If you don't know that going into it, you don't realize, oh, I'm sort of my hands are tied here to be able to do what I want to do. But actually, it's pretty smart how that works, where it kind of drives the way that you're going to build the different devices to sort of get around that limitation. And that really kind of gets you into the game and sort of being smart about how you sort of connect multiple things to these different sources to be efficient when you actually go and activate that source. So let's talk about how you activate them. So if we take a look at this final spot on our player board, you can actually put a worker here and then activate any source that's in front of you, and then take the associated actions with that source. Now, as I said, the other thing that you can do is actually put one of your mechanics onto your source or somebody else's source, and then you can activate all of the connected adjacent components as well. So let's say we've gone ahead and placed a worker on this one. We can activate a whole bunch of different things. And remember, the type of energy that we're supplying, in this case steam, is going to be very important and drive what we do. And you can activate these in any order that you wish. So in this case, we might upgrade another device that we have, and then we might activate this amplicondenser. And again, since we're powering with steam, this will allow us to actually take 3 more steam sources and add them to our supply. Now you can also see this little box here outlined in red. And what that means is if this was somebody else's device, they would trigger anything that's sort of outlined in red. So in this case, if I was playing it, I would get the 3 steam sources, and then they would get a free steam source as well. Now, when you activate somebody else's device, one other thing is always going to happen. You'll take a clock marker from whatever the current active age is and give that to that player. These are worth 1 point at the end of the game, but they also act as a round timer. Next to each of these ages is going to be a stack of a varying number of these clock counters depending on the number of players. So as you deplete them, you'll activate further and further levels of the conveyor belts. Finally, once you deplete the last stack, that will trigger at the end of the game. Now, going back to our last tile that we would have activate, this anthem organ here, it allows us to actually discard a number of sources for points. So you can see when you activate this, you can either discard 1 source for 1 point or any 3 sources for 2 points. And you can activate this tile once. And so maybe we would have grabbed sources from the previous activation and then immediately discarded these for points. So you can see sort of just a minor little combo here. The other thing to note is each of these components is worth 1 victory point at the end of the game. The sources aren't worth anything, but everything else is worth at least a point. Now, the game does come with a variety of tiles, but it does a great job of providing an index and explanation for all of the different tiles you can see here in the back of the rule book. As great as that is, funnily enough, it's actually missing a definition for one of the starter tiles of this Librarifier, which there's an explanation for it on Board Game Geek, but basically depending on which type of source you're providing, you'd be able to take a free tile from any face-up tiles on the conveyor belt. Now, like I said, there's a lot of tiles in the game, but I just want to quickly point out 3 sort of key tiles to keep in mind, and these will come out through the course of the game. They won't necessarily be available right away. Moving left to right here, we've got the expander, and this allows us to upgrade anything. And so in this case, you're not restricted by the size of the tile. So this is very powerful to get and be able to utilize, and also be sort of an invitation for folks if they want to use your device that might contain this, and it's going to just upgrade with a little bit more freedom. Next is the power converter, and you can see this one actually takes in and supplies and converts any type of power and then changes it into any other type of power. So this can actually provide you a lot more spaces on a device, and also a lot more freedom in which other components you hook up to it. And then finally, the iterator is a very interesting one, where it actually connects to a device itself, not to a source, but anytime that particular component on the device is triggered, you get to do it a second time, which can be very cool as well. And there's other devices that will get you money, get to your automaton, which is a free worker that you can place out, which goes back to the supply. There's others that are more powerful sources, more powerful iterators, and so on. So that is Steamworks, and as I said, your turn is going to be very simple. You place a worker or pass with the worker and get a little bit of money. Money is something you need to keep in mind, because as you get more workers, turn by turn, you'll get new workers, and those workers will be more expensive. As you play the workers through your turn, they get more and more expensive as you play them, and different actions you will take will require money. Sometimes you'll pay a little bit of money to get more tiles. Not everything is just, take a tile for free. Sometimes you have to pay money to do so. And so money is a concern, and the game is going to sort of evolve very quickly, and I would expect to feel chaotic. I mean, that's how it felt the first time I played it. But then after you play it once, you should really sit down and evaluate the efficiency with which you created your different devices. Because once you get into that second and third play and beyond, then you're going to be very cognizant of smartly putting together your devices so you have a really nice device that other players will use, and you're going to be much more efficient about how you sort of churn through the game. And it's going to make the game actually go a little bit quicker, because people are going to be probably more apt to activate other people's devices. Now, you're always going to usually have a spot on your board that you can activate of your own. So you're not going to be completely locked out of your devices, because you've always got that place on your player board to activate one of your own, even if it's covered up. I will say I haven't played it with 5. I played it with 3 and 4, and I would expect that with 5 it might get a little bit nutty, because you've got so many different devices to choose from. But the way that I'm going to have a takeaway with this is, I think the less players you play with the first couple of times you play it, the better it's going to be. Now, as you sort of get experience, and other players in your group and whatnot are going to get experience, then you can add more players, because the tiles by themselves aren't really doing anything that nutty. It's just the way that you assemble them that is really going to drive, like, oh, this one's really good here. This will do this, this, and this, and I can upgrade this other one, and then also trigger this other action with this other ability, or I could do this one. So, like, each tile is not very complex at all. They're kind of mundane, but once you combine them is when it gets really neat. And so, as you sort of start to have more and more options on the table, and more players are doing a lot of stuff, that's going to be kind of, you're going to feel like this is just nutty and chaotic, and you're not going to be necessarily satisfied with some of the devices that you build. Because, like, why did I attach my automaton here? Because it does nothing. Nobody wants to go here. I don't even want to go here to take the action, because it's attached to this, baloney device that just is awful, except for it gives me my automaton, which is really cool because it's a free worker. So you kind of have to learn through all of that stuff and really get good at the game, and you want to be around with other players that are good at the game, and then it gets really cool. So I would say, don't jump in this with 5 players. This is going to be kind of crazy and chaotic, which I didn't do, but I just know that that's going to happen, because even with 3, which was 3 or 4? I can't remember if I played 3 or 4 the first time. I think it was 3. Like I said. Anyway, it felt chaotic even at that player count. So, yeah, so definitely kind of roll into it slowly, and then you're going to have to go through the game at least one time to sort of shake out how the different age tiles come out, and then you're going to be like, oh, I wish I would have built my machines like this time. Then you can get back into it, and then you really start to play, and it starts to open up a little bit in terms of the gameplay. So it's very interesting. It's kind of like, oh, it's just a worker placement game, and I'm turning points into money and money into points and all that stuff like that. But it's interesting because you're putting together these different devices and sort of enticing the other players, and that's also what's driving the end of the game as well. It's not just like a fixed number of rounds. And sometimes you want to end the round and get to the next tiles or end the game because you're like, oh man, he's just going to ream us and just score a ton of points because he's just set up this beautiful engine and he's got tons of money and we don't. So we've got to just like push the end of the game. So you go activate each other's tiles and it's like, okay, there's all the clocks, now you're not gonna be able to do as much damage to us, multiple rounds on rounds. So anyway, definitely take a look at that. It's a very different, unique worker placement game and also tile placement game. Thanks.